Hey, how's it going? Bryant here. So today I'm going to answer a few questions that people asked me about my experience working in a New York City restaurant or multiple New York City restaurants as a waiter, specifically pre-COVID 2020, before the shutdown, which happened formally, I believe, March 15th or 16th of last year. So I was a waiter for about 6 years in New York City. And the first question was, how did I become one? Well, technically, I didn't start as a waiter. I started as a food runner. And I got that gig because my father was a waiter at a Chinese restaurant for like 30 years. And his manager went to a new place, and it was like a Spanish Chinese fusion place of some sort. And he worked in a food runner there at that time. There was some kitchen people, and they didn't speak English; they spoke only Chinese. So it helped that I could bridge that gap. And then after a couple of months, like I think like between 6 months to half a year, I was promoted to being a waiter, and that's how I became a waiter in New York City because I was promoted. I wasn't given the job initially. I was promoted into it. Why? Because I needed the money. It's a broke college kid. I was working while I was going to City College, or I'm not gonna make a joke about City College, City, not shitty, shit City. Did I like it? Yes and no. I loved it because it. I got to be entertained. I got to interact with people. It was definitely cool to like be there. There was air conditioning in that particular place, but then I there were like places where didn't have air conditioning. So I liked it because it was good money as a college kid. And there was like some flexibility, there was some excitement. You're always dealing with new people every day. So, and if I ever went to the establishment to eat, I would get like 50% off and a lot of free perks and food. So, definitely a lot of positives and definitely very fond of my experience. What did I not like about it? Ugh. So there's definitely some qualities I don't like about it. Like I didn't like the last minute hours. I didn't like being called last minute, like New Year's Eve or whatever. Someone called out because they were sick, but they weren't really sick, and then I filled in because I was there and it was convenient. I didn't like the there's like a lot. Sometimes there's hierarchy. Sometimes there's cliques. Sometimes there's colleagues stealing tips. Sometimes there's bullying because you're the new guy and the other people are experienced. Or this one time, or many times where they'll ring in food under my name that I didn't ring in for a customer, bring it to their table because they screwed up and they stuck me with the food order, and I had to explain that I didn't do it. But then it makes me look bad, and I don't know who like used my number to like actually sabotage me on the job, or a time where if I made like let's say $100 in cash tip, and at the end of the night I didn't close, so I would give my colleague this $100 to write in the tip pool, and then the next day I would find out that he only wrote that I gave him $50, or like $40, or $20, or no money, and the managers didn't care because it's not their money. It's the managers didn't make tips, so there's a lot of crap that goes with it. You're also at the mercy of the boss's mood, the manager's mood, the owner's mood, and whatever have you, or the customer's mood, or if the customer is just looking to take advantage of the situation to get free stuff, that they can go out of their ways to ruin your life to get what they want, because you're dealing with thousands of people, and some of them are bound to be like just completely batshit crazy. So this other question is, let's talk about money. How much did you make? This is a great question. So, depending on the shift, like some lunch shifts, when I was working in a restaurant that ended up going under, I made like $21 in terms of tips. Like I would work like 10 to 5, and then I'll make like $21 in tips. But every hour they'll still pay me my tip credit minimum wage, which at the time is like a little less than minimum wage. But if the total cumulative, and this is always a touchy subject, but I'm not really complaining about this because no matter what, you'll always make at least minimum wage by New York City law. So this all pertains to New York City slash New York State. So lowest shift, I could make like $21, or almost nothing if there's no customers. But I'll always make at least whatever the minimum wage is, and the tip credit if it's below the minimum wage, but at the end of the pay period, they have to add up to it to make it equal to minimum wage. So whatever it is, like if I make like $10 an hour and the minimum wage is 15, at the end of the day I have to make at least 15 an hour. And if I don't make up that difference in tip, the the establishment will pay that difference. So, and that's for the establishments. Other restaurants pay more or less, but that's a different story. And then how much I make at the high end, like I moved to another restaurant that was also on Park Avenue, and then I made like pretty good. Like I could make $400 in tips a night. Like on a really really good night, I'll make $400 in tips. This is working from like I don't know 5 to 1 a.m. or like 4 to 11 p.m. something around that range, or like 4 to 12, like 7 8 hours, and I'll make $400 or 350 or like a $300 average plus hourly of whatever $10 an hour in tip credit. So if I work 8 hours and I make $10 an hour because of tip credit, minimum wage is 15. I'll make $80 plus $400 in tips. So that works out to $480 for 8 hours of work. So you divide that, that's like $60 an hour, something like that. So at the end of the day, it's like making $60 an hour. So you could have really, really good and really, really bad depending on which establishment you work at. Okay, so going on to the next question. Hours. You could work like a double shift, but typically you would work like a regular shift is, I don't know, could be 8 hours, could be 11 hours, depending on like when to when, but typically it won't be like, it's not as bad as people make it sound, in my opinion. What did you have to know? I had to understand food, allergies. I had to understand how to cater. Well, customer service is number one. Like the most important thing is the customer, or we call them guests. So guest walks in. Most important thing is you make them feel at home, like it's really their place. You have to cater to them. It's like, hey, how are you doing? My name's Brian. Nice to meet you. Let's get you all settled in. Some menus. Can I bring you some water? Something to drink to start. Bottle of still water. Depends on the establishment. Like some will have offer bottle of still, bottle of sparkling, and then you'll offer that, some cocktails. You have to know like some alcohols. Like you have to know like what's in Manhattan. You have to, if you have like fancy clients, they'll ask you, oh, do you have a full-bodied white? And then you recommend them a Chardonnay or something. So, and then like you have to go into details. Like you have to name, like in some establishments I worked at, you have to name like 6 different types of grapes, 6 regions, red wine, white wine. You have to know like 10 whiskeys, 10 tequilas, 10 vodkas, or like basically like know what the establishment is selling, and then have very very good service. Be very prompt, be very attentive to the guests, make their experience great. Like that's number one. Like how do you have to know? Be people person. Like people are going there because they want to enjoy, have an experience, because you're making tips, right? They want to have a good experience. They want to eat. They want to just enjoy their time. Make it as great as possible for their enjoyment, and that's the priority thing. How is tips split? So I worked in a few places where, and this is particularly my place, but I know of other methods. So tip split in my place is basically called pool house. So whatever the restaurant, the whole restaurant brings in tips for that shift, it's split according to points. So like let's say, and we get a percentage. So let's say you're a waiter, you'll make 10 points, and then busser will make 5, bartender might make a percentage of the floor, whatever it is, but you make a percentage of the tips. So at the end of the night, they pool all the tips, cash and credit cards and everything, and then you divide it equally based on the people that are working. So it was a pool house. So this way, if you're working a slow section or a good section, no one's at the mercy of like, oh, I got a great table and I got a crap table. It's just like even playing field. So everyone has to help everyone. So there's no such thing as my table or my section. Like there is your section, there are your tables, there are your guests. But if your colleague needs help, you jump in and help them, because you also get tips from them. They also get tips from you. So it's like a foster community, something like that. And it was also like a medium range establishment, like 120 tables. And this is doable for split. What's a tip credit? So a tip credit in New York State is the ability for an employer to pay less than minimum wage, but the thing is that, so this is always a hotly contested subject, and it's always like hugely debated. I don't want to get into the politics of it so much, but let me just look at it from the objective point of view. So if let's say minimum wage is $15 an hour, tip credit might mean the employer can pay you $10 an hour with a $5 tip credit, which is that difference, right? If you make more than, or at least the $5 difference in tips for that shift, the employer can pay you the $10 because you cover the difference in tip. But under no circumstance, like let's say you had no customers that day, the employer has to pay you, instead of $10 an hour, which is less than minimum wage, they have to make up that difference and pay you $15 an hour. So no matter what, you always have to legally, if the employer is acting like by the laws of New York State and by federal laws and whatever, they will pay you at least whatever the minimum wage is. So, but if let's say you make like $200 in tips that day for an 8-hour shift, the employer is going to pay you $10 an hour because you already made $200 a day in a shift in tips. So you might be, after tips, you might be making like $40-50 an hour. So that's where like the tip credit stuff becomes controversial. But anyway, other question: drugs and smokes and alcohol. So yeah, I definitely had a lot of colleagues, or not a lot, but like I definitely had one or two colleagues that was like on cocaine, like working, or like, yeah, there's definitely drugs there. Smokes. A lot of my colleagues, they smoked, but I didn't, and I don't drink. Like I was a bartender that didn't drink, really. Best memory. The friends I made, honestly, because you work with these people need like deep in all the time every day. Like I see them more than my own family members. And the guests are great. Made a lot of friends. Like I made one of my best memories is like when I made this. I was serving brunch as a waiter, and one of my customers, like, as my tip or whatever, like offered to take me out for brunch because I did such a good job to him, and then I made a bunch of lifelong friends this way. Or like there was this customer that actually gave me their own handmade bracelet from like just building relationships, and the management's really good. Like not all managers are great, but I definitely was fortunate to have at least enough decent ones where I'm like, thank you, you know, like really good management that like it's a job, right? But like if you have good management, it definitely helps. And fun and work. So like after work, like I had some great colleagues, and maybe I would go to like a 24-hour restaurant after work, and then I would have like food and drinks with them, and then Uber back or whatever. So there's definitely a lot of fun to be had, but there's also the work element, because at the end of the day you have to perform a function, and I'm pretty sure it's like the same in any job where you're hired because you know they're paying you for your time to be there to perform a specific task. So that's definitely important, but I would definitely say that I also had a lot of fun because at the end of the day, our fun, if like the customers are having fun, we're having fun, and it just makes the life better if it's convenient, and it is what it is. Anyway, thank you for listening to my quick answering interview questions about working in a restaurant in New York City. Hope to do more.